This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. And welcome back, everyone. This is the X-Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell, and we're coming to you from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free, 1-800-610-7035. My email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On MSN Messenger, xzoneradiotv@hotmail.com, and our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. Exonation, my guest for this hour is Charles James Hull. He was born and raised in rural Wisconsin. He enlisted in the U.S. Air Force on July 20th, 1964. While stationed for over 20 years at Nellis Air Force Base, which is just outside Las Vegas, Nevada, he did extensive duty on the Desert Gunnery Range in Indian Springs, Nevada. He continued for another year as a weather observatory in Vietnam's Mekong Delta. Charles received an award for surviving more than 35 communist attacks. Oh my gosh, that is quite some number. Also, after his honorable discharge in May of 1968, Charles married Marie on the condition that he would return to college. In record time, he earned both a BA degree in thermal physics and a master's degree in applied nuclear physics at SDSU, San Diego, California. Charles did PhD-level postgraduate work at the University of Maine in Bangor. Later, he earned a Master of Arts in Business Administration from Nova Southeastern University in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. When Charles and Marie had been married for a few months, he decided to risk telling her about the extraterrestrials that he had encountered at Indian Springs. Marie wasn't terribly interested in whether or not ETs existed at that time. She just said if she met one, she hoped she would behave in a manner that was a credit to the human race. That might just be another way to describe the current buzzword that is, exopolitics. Joining me now is Charles Hull. And Charles, always great having you with us in the X-Zone. How are you, my friend?
Oh, thank you for having me on your show. It's always a pleasure for me to be on your show. I greatly enjoy it.
Oh, thank you very much, Charles. Charles, tell us a little bit about the work that you did as a weather observer in Nevada.
A weather observer in Las Vegas, Nevada, on paper, was the best job rated by the military. It's the best job an enlisted man could have in the military. And at Indian Springs, it was like, on paper, it was supposed to be better. The idea was that you were at Indian Springs. You were there were 4 gunnery ranges, and there was only one duty weather observer who was in charge of all of them. And you'd get up at like 3 in the morning and drive out to whichever gunnery range the Nellis base commander wanted you to, which was Nellis. Indian Springs is like 90 miles from Nellis, 70 to 90 miles, and then you'd at 4:30 there was a weather shack out there, and you'd fill up the weather balloons called pie balls, and release one precisely at 4:30 a.m. and then track it for 10 or 15 minutes. You had a theodolite and and there were some buildings out there,
Right.
and a generator shack, and so on. And then after you took your readings, then you go back to your weather shack, do some computations, and there was a phone, and then you'd phone the weather station at Nellis and tell them what the winds were, like
Right. Yeah.
at 10,000 feet out of the southwest at 5, and so on. And then in support of the fighter weapons school and the fact that airplanes would come and practice, train pilots there from time to time. And then you get to drive the 20 miles or so back into the base.
All right, Charles, we're going to have to take a break here. We're going to come back and talk more about your experiences, and then the day that you actually knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that we are not alone in this universe. X-Zone Nation, Charles Hall is my very special guest. www.millennialhospitality.com, and Charles and I will be back on the other side of this commercial break as we continue here in the X-Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.
In over 36 years in law enforcement, I've learned a few things. The most important is the proper gathering and preservation of evidence is vital to putting the bad guy behind bars. It's no different in the world of paranormal investigation. Whether it's the search for the afterlife, cryptozoology, extraterrestrials, and UFOs, how we gather that evidence of their existence, preserve that same evidence, and present it to a court of our peers will make the ultimate difference in proving the existence of worlds and entities that are beyond our imagination. Come with me on a journey that seeks to prove with undisputable evidence what man has struggled to believe for centuries. Join me, Larry Lawson, host of the Paranormal Stakeout, coming to the X-Zone Broadcast Network. Check out the broadcast schedule for Paranormal Stakeout with yours truly, Larry Lawson, at www.xzbn.net. For more information about me, my travels, and my team, check out our website at www.paranormalfbi.com or join us on Facebook at Florida Bureau of Paranormal.
Welcome back, everyone. Charles Hall is my special guest. www.millennialhospitality.com. All right, Charles, when we left before the commercial break, we were talking about your duties in the Air Force as a weather observer. Then something really happened.
Yes. When I was originally I was sent up there when I reported for Nellis in March of 1965.
Mm-hmm.
I was on OJT, and I described these events in books 1 and books 4. Originally, I was supposed to finish my OJT, which would take 9 months or so. But right off, the Pentagon wanted, as I described in my books, the Pentagon wanted me to go up to Indian Springs and relieve the person who was there before me. So I was sent up to Nellis, up to Indian Springs, like in April of late April 1965, and the guy before me had gone over the hill. The Pentagon knew about it, but they wouldn't press him. And people started telling me about the legend of Range 4 Harry. They said there was something up the valley. And I described those events in books 4 and in books 1. And I discovered that there was a base dug into the mountains at the north end of Indian Springs Valley for extraterrestrials. When you're physically at Indian Springs, Nevada, and you're looking straight north, the mountains that you're looking at are areas 53 and 54, and they're inside Area 51.
Mm-hmm.
And the main hangar is dug in on towards the top of that mountain at Area 54, and the Area 53, which is the western part of the mountain when you look straight north and just a little bit to the left, that's Area 53. That's their underground living areas. That's where they're dug in on. There's tunnels and everything in there, and they live underground. And around those mountains, there was a big double perimeter, and the human guards maintained the outer perimeter, and the alien guards maintained the inner perimeter. And everything inside the inner perimeter is treated like a foreign embassy or a foreign airport, a spaceport. And when I came across them out in the desert or in my barracks or, virtually anywhere, The first 6 months, there aren't words to describe the fear or the terror, because I was sent up there with no briefing or anything. At least 41 weather observers were sent up there during the 7 years before me, and every one of them got compromised. Most of them became so afraid of the ranges after just a very short time, like a week or 10 days, that they wouldn't go out there at all and take the weather reports. They would just hide in the chow hall and make up fake winds and call them out and make up fake weather reports and phone them into to Nellis. A few got attacked, some got burned. I was the only one that actually got up every morning and went out there to the best of my abilities, rain or shine, sick or in health, and did my best to take a weather report. But I'm very religious. For there were months there for those early months where I thought I was nuts, because you'd be like 40. My clearance allowed me to go anywhere I wanted, all the way up all over those mountains, day or night, as long as I was totally alone. But my clearance also said that no help would ever come, that if I got in trouble, that no one would come, even if I was dying. I could take myself anywhere, but I had to bring myself back. And I've been all over all over Indian Springs Valley, back in the 60s, and all over the valley to the east of it, where Dogbone Lake is. And I discovered that in addition to the main hangar, that there were 5 or 7 scout hangars dug into the mountains. For example, in the valley that has Dogbone Lake at the north, there was a scout craft hangar dug in on the western side of the mountains on the western side of Dogbone Valley, where the black car was kept. The black car I describe in Book 3. And after 6 months or so, I got tired. As I describe in Book 2, there came a day where I decided that it wasn't me, that I wasn't nuts, that I wasn't dreaming, that whatever I was looking at was real, even if it didn't make sense to people who believe in relativity and Albert Einstein, and that what I was looking at was real flesh and blood creatures, just like you and I, who happened to know how to build spacecraft that could travel faster than the speed of light and make the deep space crossing in just a matter of months, weeks or months, depending on the distance, and that Einstein was wrong about relativity. And in Book 2, in the chapter entitled "The Journey," there came a night where I finally decided that whatever I was looking at was real and it wasn't me. And I described that night, the journey, in Book 2.
Charles, what did the aliens look like?
During my lifetime, there are 3. I've personally seen 3 different kinds of aliens. The ones out at Indian Springs Valley I call the tall whites. Their skin is as white as a piece of paper. They're flesh and blood creatures. They look just like you and I, only they're humanoid, but they're very frail. Throughout most of their life, they're about the same height as I am. I'm 5'11", and I describe them in my books. They have men, women, and children, and Range 4 Harry, for whom the legend of Range 4 Harry was named, he was the same height I am, 5'11", 5'10", but based on the depth of his footprints in the soft dirt out on the ranges, I estimated that he only weighed between 90 and 110 pounds. And when I was young, I used to weigh 180. And when I was in full combat dress, I weighed 202. When I was fit for when I was, in Vietnam,
right.
I was in combat, I weighed 202. And so they're very frail. Now their nervous system seems to run, I estimated, 2.5 to 3 times faster than that of a human. And I personally watched them run at speeds of anywhere from 27 to 35 miles an hour out across the desert. The tall whites like it warmer than we do. So, for example, when it was 108 in the shade, even though I was used to the desert, I had to be careful about being out in the sun, or take water with you and not press your luck. Whereas for them, they were just starting to get real comfortable, just starting to be shirt-sleeve weather. One day when it was 118 and a half in the shade, and I had to stay, in the shade. I couldn't take more than 10 minutes of that sunlight. The teacher and the children were out playing for a couple hours in the sunshine. They were just finally getting, really comfortable at that level, at that temperature. And the tall whites don't age the way we do. When we get to be, they live about 10 times longer than humans. They live 600 to 800 Earth years. But when they get to be about 40, or equivalent to a human that's about 40, which for them is like 400 years old, they instead of aging as you and I would, they start to grow again, and so they get, so they get taller, but their internal organs do not grow in the same proportion as their skeleton. So they have several such periods of growth, so that by the time, so it was very common to see them 8 or 8.5 feet tall as they got to be equivalent to a human, say 50, 55, or 45, 50. By the time they get to be 600 or 800 years old, or perhaps longer, but 600 to 800 I think is reasonable, they get to be very tall, like 9 feet tall or so, but their internal organs haven't grown in the same proportion, so as they get taller, they become more and more fragile. Eventually, when they're very old, like 800 years or 600 years in there somewhere, there comes a growth period where their body grows and their organs don't, and at that time they die because they've become so frail. It was unusual to see a tall white taller than 8.5 feet that didn't have a younger person near them to help to steady them when they were walking around in the Earth's gravity. There were a few, especially men, but by the time they got to be like 9 feet tall, 9.5 feet tall, they almost always, when out walking around, would have a younger person next to them. However, these great ages don't necessarily work to their advantage in every way, because if they fall and break a leg, and they're very frail,
right?
If you were to hit one, say like you slap them on the back or something and break a bone, it takes their bones roughly 10 times longer to heal up than it does for a human. So they don't have like contact sports like like basketball or baseball. They don't think you know how you and I as humans, we naturally think slapstick is funny.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, see, if they scratch themselves, it takes their skin 10 times longer to heal up. So they're far more conscious of safety and keeping not injuring themselves than what you and I would ever think of. They love to play the game, the children especially, love to play the game hide and go seek.
All right, speaking about hide and go seek, you and I have to go hide and seek during this commercial break with the news at the bottom of the hour, Charles. Always great talking to you.
Sure.
Exonation, our special guest this hour is Charles James Hall. He's the author of the Millennial Hospitality series, and his website is www.millennialhospitality.com. I'll say that one more time without slurring it. www.millennialhospitality.com. My name's Rob McConnell. This is the X-Zone. We'll be
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone broadcast network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Exonation. Charles Hull is our special guest. His website is www.millennialhospitality.com. We're talking about Charles' experiences as a weather observer in the United States Air Force, and his encounters with real extraterrestrials. Now, Charles, do you have any idea where these ETs came from and why they were here on this planet?
The reason they're here is because they're maintaining a spaceport. You know, the same reason that we have bases on islands in the Pacific. Because space is the sun occurs in like a giant bubble in space, where most stars have another star within 2 light months of them. But the Earth, the nearest star, but for the sun, the nearest star is like 3 3/4 light years away. And the sun occurs in the middle of a giant empty bubble. And, excuse me.
Sure.
Extending into that bubble, there's like an island chain of like Bernard's star, the 4th closest star, and the next star whose name I forget. I think it's like Wolf 579. You see, and so by having a base on the Earth, it allows them to a much shorter travel distance across that giant bubble when just doing ordinary things like commerce and so on. Well, of course, they're flesh and blood creatures, and their spacecraft are just real objects which need to be repaired, refueled, and so on. And so what they do at the base is the same thing that happens at an airport. They're deep spacecraft, which I've seen repeatedly. They come in and leave on schedule, just like an airport. They typically come in at sundown on the night of the full moon because they're pushing against the gravity field. And at sundown, you're on the part of the Earth that trails the Earth in its orbit, and so it's like landing on an aircraft carrier. Then there's a regular staff at the base, you know, just like at an airport. There's a regular ground crew, and then the deep spacecraft may have anywhere from 200 to 500 people on board, tall whites, and they're in port for like typically 2 weeks. And they use Dogbone Lake as the landing ground. They don't actually touch down at Dogbone unless there's some problem with their spacecraft. Typically, they just come in and stop at 10,000 feet, and then after checking out everything, then head off to the northwest, where the main entrance to the main hangar is, up in those mountains. And and then they're in port for 2 weeks while everything's repaired and refurbished. And then at midnight, on the night of the new moon, that is when the moon is in between the Earth and the sun, at midnight you're looking straight out into an empty sky. Then that's when they typically come out. You know, that's when they take off. They typically bring the deep spacecraft out after final boarding and sit at 10,000 feet over Dogbone Lake as they're doing the final checkdown, and then when everything's perfectly aligned, then they hit the gas and head off, you know, and take off. Once they get above the Earth's atmosphere, then they change direction, and typically they head towards the star Arcturus, but I've seen them head towards other stars as well, including some that I think are only visible in the southern hemisphere. Just the same way that when you're at an airport, you can see planes take off, and some head for Chicago and some for San Francisco. And during those 2 weeks, when they're in port, the new arrivals, the passengers on board the spacecraft, who may never have seen humans before, are intensely curious of Earth, and so the ground crew, the base, the guys who are there all the time, like to take them around and show them the place. And by that I mean they would bring them, in small groups, like groups of 8 or 10, into Indian Springs, into the trailer park at Indian Springs, into the barracks where I was, into the town of Indian Springs. You'd see them walking up and down at night, like at 2 a.m., looking in people's houses and through the windows and everything, just like we do at the zoo. And it wasn't just the tall whites that would do this, because this base, remember, is done on an agreement with the American Air Force. Sometimes there'd be the American generals with them. And I'm bunking alone in my barracks at Indian Springs, and there may only be 4 or 5. There are typically only 7 or so airmen on board, on the Indian Springs base. It's a very small place. Some nights I was the only one. And you'd see, to be sitting in your barracks and have a 3-star general, a 2-star general, a 1-star general, an American, Air Force general, and 5 aliens just walk in and, have the aliens and start, have them start explaining, have the general start explaining, no, this is my man, and this is what humans will look like.
How did the aliens communicate? Did they speak English? Was it mind transference?
Some could teach themselves to speak. Some had taught themselves to speak and read English. Their natural language, their hearing is as good as that of a dog. So they can hear sounds that only, up to 40,000 cycles that only dogs can hear. And their eyesight is as good as that of a cat. And their vocal cords are capable of making all those sounds. And so one time I asked the alien lady, whose CIA name was the teacher, what her real name was. And she said that if she told me, I couldn't hear all the sounds that went into her name, and that if I wanted to address her using her real name, my vocal cords couldn't make all the sounds. And therefore, I should just call her the teacher, you see. And if you hear them out in the desert at night, the parts that a human can hear typically sound like the western meadowlark, or a horse whinny, or if they're happy, dogs barking. But you're really only hearing a small part of the spectrum. Well, of course, their eyesight is as good as that of a cat's, and on their home planet, I estimate that they're used to a planet with a 90-hour day. And so, and they need to eat and sleep and rest just like we do, only they do so on a 2-day cycle, as opposed to you and I to do it on a 1-day cycle. And so, when you were talking with them, how, talkative they were and stuff like that, just like humans, kind of depended on how tired they were, well rested, or so on.
Right.
Because they can make sounds that we can't hear, you could have a group of new arrivals with a guard come out and just stand there like 20 feet from you, and I speak from direct experience, and you might not hear anything whatever, because they know that they can talk using those high sounds and we can't hear it, and they might just be talking to each other using a real high voice, and so on the other hand, I asked them after I got over my fear and made friends with a few of them, and each one of them is an individual, just like humans. I asked them if they would only speak English when they were around me, because I found it quite frightening or disconcerting to be looking through my theodolite tracking a balloon at 4:30 in the morning and have a group of people behind me barking like dogs and whinnying like horses.
I guess so.
I'm only human. It scares
Right.
the hell out of you to be sitting back there and hear somebody whinny from behind the generator shack, and you think, my God, there's a horse there, and he's going to attack me, And then you go around there, and there's nobody. There's just some kid, who isn't human,
Charles, what was their means of propulsion in their spacecraft?
In my books, in books 3 and 4, as you mentioned, I have a master's degree in nuclear physics, and in my books I've copyrighted a theory I call Hall photon theory. And my theory is that, since I saw their craft close up, my theory is that relativity is totally wrong.
Yeah.
It's just a mathematical approach, and that there are more physically real force fields than what Einstein knew about. Like there's a force field that pushes against gravity, and my theory is that within a beam of light, there's a third field. Modern physicists say that a beam of light or microwaves or whatever is just two fields, an electric field and a magnetic field coupled together. Hall photon theory says you're missing one. There's a third one in there. And that third field is not one Einstein knew about, and that third field opens the door to a whole new kind of physics. Time doesn't slow down when you approach the speed of light. Distances don't get shorter when you accelerate. That's got to be nonsense. If you want to treat the mathematics that way, that's one thing. But but the reality is time doesn't slow down when you approach the speed of light. And I'm absolutely certain of it. One time I'm certain that the lady whose name was the teacher, and her friend, my friend, the tall white whose CIA name was Range 4 Harry, and tour guide whose life I was credited with saving. I'm certain that they weren't on this earth back in the summer of 1965 for roughly 2.5 to 3 months. And on the other hand, I'm certain that they went somewhere outside the solar system to another star. I believe it to be Arcturus, but they never bothered explaining it to me. And when they got back, since they wouldn't tell me where they'd come from, what they'd been doing, when they got back, I said I was surprised that you had been able to go to another star and back in such a short time, because Einstein proved that you can't travel faster than the speed of light. And they were laughing so hard. They have a tendency to fall down on the ground and laugh, themselves silly, more so than a human. And the teacher and the Range 4 Harry and everyone, they were laughing for like 10 minutes that way. And when the teacher finally got up, she was wiping tears of laughter away from her eyes. And she looked at me and said, "Well, as you can see, we're here now." And that's what they thought about relativity. Who in their right mind would ever believe that nonsense? I mean, I could see that they're here. Obviously, it's wrong. And see, their ships that were designed with a double hull, and in between those two hulls, there was like, in the case of the smaller ones, the scout craft, I estimated there must have been 1,000 miles of ceramic fiber optics in all different kinds of windings, like you have in an electromagnet or a transformer. And then what their propulsion system was is they would generate subatomic particles. I don't know which one, but I know that there's 5 that are very easy to create. And they put out different force fields than what Einstein knew about. Like an electron puts out an electric field, and and all the particles put out gravity.
That's right.
Well, these particles put out more fields, and if you just and of course modern physicists don't know about them because they don't go looking for them because if you when you design a particle accelerator, all your detection equipment, everything, is based on looking for particles that carry an electric charge. Well, these other particles don't necessarily carry the electric charge, you see, like neutrons. And so, you don't have a neutron accelerator because, or nobody knew about the neutron until, you went and started looking for it. Well, see, these particles are what they're running in those coils. The fiber optic coils are designed to how we would build an electromagnet using electrons. Well, they build the equivalent thing, only using these other particles, and then the field they're amplifying and working with are one of these new fields. I call them the starshine fields. And they have, and around their craft, they streamline their craft. The craft are real smooth. They don't have any any antenna or anything protruding. And that's so that the field is real smooth. And then around the craft, there's an outer set of windings that protects the occupants of the craft and everything inside that from the forces of acceleration or the forces of inertia. And so I personally used to watch them come in like the deep spacecraft. They would come in at 8 to 12,000 miles an hour, which for them is just peanuts, because their deep spacecraft could easily accelerate past the speed of light. I estimated that they must travel at least at 44 times the speed of light. Well, they would come in and stop on a dime at 10,000 feet. And in the course of doing that, the occupants on board, if you were trying to do that with a rocket, you'd take more than 15,000 Gs. I used to watch their scout craft, watch them get on board the scout craft some distance away, like a mile and a half or 2 miles, and then close up, and then when they powered up that final set of coils, they'd appear to fuzz over because it interacts with light a little bit.
Yeah.
And then they would raise up slowly off the desert, and then travel on, like one day I was measuring them.
Charles, you and I have to take our final break. It's always fascinating talking to you. Please stand by. Exonation Charles Hull is our guest this hour. He's the author of the Millennial Hospitality series. His website is millennialhospitality.com. We'll be back after this commercial break.
Negative K, nothing further.
In over 36 years in law enforcement, I've learned a few things. The most important is the proper gathering and preservation of evidence is vital to putting the bad guy behind bars. It's no different in the world of paranormal investigation. Whether it's the search for the afterlife, cryptozoology, extraterrestrials, and UFOs, how we gather that evidence of their existence, preserve that same evidence, and present it to a court of our peers will make the ultimate difference in proving the existence of worlds and entities that are beyond our imagination. Come with me on a journey that seeks to prove with undisputable evidence what man has struggled to believe for centuries. Join me, Larry Lawson, host of the Paranormal Stakeout, coming to the X-Zone Broadcast Network. Check out the broadcast schedule for Paranormal Stakeout with yours truly, Larry Lawson, at www.xzbn.net. For more information about me, my travels, and my team, check out our website at www.paranormalfbi.com or join us on Facebook at Florida Bureau of Paranormal.
I am Dr. Carl O'Helvey, founder, president of a new cancer foundation focusing on evidence-based physical, mental, and spiritual interventions, including natural cancer cures, prayer, meditation, affirmations, nutrition, and other related holistic cancer prevention and cure modalities. These are used in cancer education, research, and financing care. I ask for your help to continue this important work by donating at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
You're listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
Oh, well, there we are, Exonation. Another 4 hours, another evening here in the X-Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell. First of all, I'd like to thank all our guests tonight. We've had one heck of a great show, thanks to our great guests and you, our listening audience worldwide. My guest this hour is Charles Hull. We're talking about Charles's series, the Millennial book series. And Exonation, if you'd like to visit his website, it is millennialhospitality.com. That's millennialhospitality.com, millennialhospitality.com. And once again, he's the author of the Millennial Hospitality series. Charles, always great talking to you. But I have to ask you this. With everything that you know, that you've seen,
Yes.
Has the government or any other agency ever tried to suppress you from talking about this?
No, and I explain why in book one. It's because in '65, one of the guys, originally we did TDY and we'd rotate, one of the guys who, I went up there, then one of the guys who replaced me on the next rotation, who seemed perfect for it, got burned. And he went running out to the scout craft as it was landing, thinking he was going out to an airplane crash site, and made the mistake of hitting one of the tall white children, and they almost killed him. The adults almost killed him. They always come armed. And so the tall white generals and the American generals jointly agreed that they would pick one person, and that was me, and just send him permanently all the time, and that he could do anything he wanted. Nothing I did would ever be classified, and whether and he wouldn't be briefed, he wouldn't be debriefed. He'd just be sent out there all the time. And the reason they picked me was because I was credited with having saved the life of the teacher's daughter, who was equivalent to a human girl, 4 or 5 years old, as I describe in Book 1, the day she was trapped down in the sagebrush on Range 1. And so they all chose me hands down, and I described that in Book 1. And my clearance allowed me to go anywhere, anywhere I wanted, above ground, day or night. And the ranges would never be closed to me. I could never be ordered off the range.
Charles, we're running out of time. We're running out of time really fast here. One question. Do you have any photographs of these aliens?
No, I never took any photographs because I was out in a classified area, inside a classified area. I never brought anything with me off the ranges, just my memories.
Wow.
And if I had brought photographs, where would I keep them? You know, I mean, hell, they came into my barracks at night and went through my locker. You know, the idea, and if they, since their electronics allowed them to read your mind and to place thoughts in your mind, I mean, if you went out there with a camera and said, "Gee, I'll take their picture and hide it from them," I mean, that's suicide. They would, they didn't lie to me. Why would I lie to them?
Charles, I'm sorry to say this, my friend, but we've run out of time. We'll have to have you back on because this story continues. Thank you very much for joining us. Continued success, and I look forward to the next time you join us here in the X Zone.
Oh, thank you. Remember, I saw them take the American generals to the moon in 1965.
We'll talk about that the next time you're with us.
Okay.
Bye-bye now. www.millennialhospitality.com. I'll be back tomorrow night at 10 o'clock. So until then, my good friends, always remember, take care of each other and always keep your eyes to the sky and your heart to the light. Good night.